Tonight, the final sprint to Election Day is on. While the presidential candidates race through the swing states, many Christians are making prayer a priority.
We need to pray for God's will to be done.
Plus, Israel ramps up its war against Hezbollah.
We are not stopping. We are at war and attacking all the places that Hezbollah uses for terrorism.
The latest on the crisis in the Middle East. And tens of thousands die every year from hospital infections. What healthcare workers are doing to save lives and reduce the risk. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation. Just over 2 weeks to go until Election Day, and both presidential candidates are in a fierce battle for undecided voters. Good evening in Washington, I'm Jenna Browder. With 15 days to go, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are blitzing through the critical swing states. Harris hoping to shore up her blue wall, today campaigning in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin with her new Republican ally, Liz Cheney.
We cannot, with such fundamental stakes being presented, afford to be mired in ideological differences.
Meanwhile, Donald Trump was in North Carolina today to survey the aftermath of Hurricane Helene.
The communities were ravaged and destroyed. We're praying for you, and we will not forget about you. We will never forget about you.
A new poll from the Washington Post and Scholar School shows Harris leading in Georgia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Meanwhile, Trump is ahead in Arizona and North Carolina. And the candidates are tied at 48% in Nevada. And for more on this, let's bring in Julia Manchester, politics reporter for The Hill. Julia, welcome. So last week, Trump was up in Battleground polling. Now Harris appears to have the edge in several of those states. What do you make of this consistent back and forth?
Yeah, it's good to see you, Jenna. Actually, for the first time in our polling average and forecasting with Decision Desk HQ here at The Hill, we actually see that Donald Trump's chances of winning the election, according to our forecast, has actually overtaken Kamala Harris's chances for the first time this election, or for the first time since she became the Democratic presidential nominee. So we are certainly seeing that back and forth. I think that's going to be expected, but we really have to look in at these undecided swing voters. There was an Emerson College poll released last week that showed that there are roughly 3% of undecided voters. Some other polls show there being 6% or so, but that's how narrow we are talking. And this is going to be decided in those 7 key battleground states that we'll be paying attention to. But right now, I would say, even though it's a back and forth, it seems that the momentum seems to be with former President Trump.
Yeah, Julia, we know 15 million ballots have been cast so far in early voting, with both Georgia and North Carolina breaking records. What does this tell you about the election, and do we know if this turnout is leaning more heavily in one direction?
Well, that's a good question, because we really don't. In past elections, we have seen Democrats lean into early voting, more than Republicans. In fact, just 4 years ago, former President Trump, or then President Trump, would criticize early voting and mail-in ballots, saying that, essentially tying them to election interference. He has certainly changed his tune on that. We've seen other Republicans change their tune on that, because we see this idea of making a plan to vote really, resonating with voters. And that essentially means not only making a plan for Election Day, but making a plan to vote early in case something happens on Election Day, in case the weather's bad, you're caught up at work, etc. You are starting to see now the Republican Party really embrace that. So it's really impossible to tell who is benefiting from this, because it is so incredibly narrow in states like North Carolina and Georgia. North Carolina, though, will be unique, because we've seen that some of the hardest hit parts of the state in Western North Carolina tend to be Republican dominated. So turnout for Republicans is going to be extra important in that state.
You're doing a good job.
Momentum being more on Trump's side. I have noticed a bit of a shift in the Harris tone. It seems a little bit more aggressive, a little more angry, and definitely going after Donald Trump. Is that their closing message, and what do you make of this shift in tone?
Yeah, in terms of their closing message, it seems to be on a number of issues, obviously talking about abortion and their view that, Trump, they're accusing Trump and Republicans of wanting to instate a national abortion ban. But also there's this idea of democracy and protecting democracy, and tying former President Trump to his role in the January 6th attack on the Capitol. I was watching Harris over the weekend in Atlanta, and she talked about these two issues, and it seems that we're seeing these two issues being really zeroed in on by the campaign. In fact, today she's been campaigning with former Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney, very outspoken Trump critic, but Liz Cheney oftentimes talks about January 6th, so this seems to be a major final message for them.
Yep, let the closing arguments begin. All right, Julia Manchester with The Hill. It's always so good to see you. Thank you, Julia.
Thank you, Jenna.
Well, as Americans prepare to vote, a new survey shows more than half will likely pray before casting their ballots. Charlene Aaron reports on the crucial role prayer is playing ahead of this election.
According to a Religion News Service poll, 58% of Americans say religion is important in determining who they will support for president. Even more revealed that faith helps them deal with the stress and uncertainty surrounding the election.
Come on, right now, would you lift up your hands?
From 250,000 women praying on the National Mall in D.C. to online petitions like this, prayer is moving up in priority ahead of what's seen as one of our history's most divisive political seasons.
The most important part that we need to pray for right now for the election is for those that are up for election will fear God.
Dr. Cornay Becker, Dean of Theology at Regent University, says while Scripture commands Christians to pray, he adds doing so in alignment with God's will is key.
We need to pray for God's will to be done. Jesus said it the best in the prayer that he taught us. May his kingdom come, may his will be done in our land as it is in heaven.
A sentiment supported by Walter Kim, president of the National Association of Evangelicals, who also urges believers to pray for opportunities to be a good witness.
You know, the politics will come and go. Elected officials will come and go. But our commitments as Christ followers means that there's a commitment to the good news of Jesus Christ and bearing witness to it that should endure past any election. And my deep concern is for the name of Jesus and the ways that Christians engage would be honoring to that name.
Kim points to the biblical example found in James chapter 1 as a way forward.
James' admonition here, I think, is so incredibly important. What is the posture that we're taking? Are we quick to listen? Are we slow to speak? Are we slow to become angry? Because the righteousness of God that ultimately we say we're after really requires a different type of posture.
News of 2 failed assassination attempts on former President Donald Trump has led voters across the country to worry about more violence. In one recent poll, 73% of likely voters expressed concern about politically motivated violence following the election. Only 27% had little to no concern.
One of the most dangerous things in the country right now is how volatile and divisive the language is, not only from politicians, but from ordinary citizens. And I think we as Christians should really pray. Jesus said the following, that a house divided against itself cannot stand. We need to pray for peaceful words, words that unite, words that bring healing, and indeed pray for God to unite this country again.
To help foster such unity, Washington's National Cathedral will host election-related services and prayers, focusing on peace, grace, and healing. We have a breach in our public life, a brokenness that requires us to take on the work of reconciliation, said the very Reverend Randolph Marshall Hollerith, Dean of Washington National Cathedral. He added, Jesus' command is very clear. Love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who abuse you. For Election Day, the nonpartisan group Faiths United to Save Democracy hopes to provide a calming presence by posting chaplains at polls in several battleground states.
If there's tension between people going into the voting place, they are giving training on de-escalation to try to help people realize everybody wants to vote. We all have that right. And they're trying to make people stay calm and not be accusing of one another or argumentative.
Meanwhile, no matter the outcome, some planning to be involved in the political process say they are focused on a bigger picture.
So ultimately, we're not looking for a perfect candidate because Jesus is king and he's the only person that is perfect. So for me, the Bible teaches us to pray for our leaders, for wisdom, and the Bible also teaches us that all authority is given by God. So I want the leader to win that most aligns with biblical truth.
Also praying that our own desires decrease and that the Lord's increase, and whoever He wants to lead us as a country, that He will rightfully put them in place, and that He will use them however He sees fit. And His will is much greater than our own.
Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
Arlene, and coming up, while Israel strikes Hezbollah across Beirut, the IDF plans an attack against Iran. Welcome back. Israel is escalating its campaign against Hezbollah, today striking the terror group's financial network in air raids across Beirut. Israel says it will continue pounding Hezbollah until it collapses.
We attacked close to 30 targets all over Lebanon, which is some kind of Hezbollah's banking system. Al-Qard al-Hassan, that receives the money from Iran, lends it, and ultimately finances Hezbollah's terrorism.
Meanwhile, Secretary of State Antony Blinken is heading to the Middle East again, this time hoping to kickstart negotiations to end the war in Gaza and free the hostages. 101 hostages remain in Gaza, including 7 Americans. In other news, an ancient discovery is shedding light on the early church. The Megiddo mosaic dates back nearly 2,000 years. Experts believe it's decorated one of the earliest Christian sites in Israel. CBN News Washington correspondent Michelle London takes us to the Museum of the Bible to show us this amazing find.
Here in the nation's capital, we're already seeing evidence of how this beautifully preserved 1,800-year-old Megiddo mosaic is bringing the start of Christianity back to life. Since its recent premiere here at the Museum of the Bible, curators say it's already drawn in thousands of visitors from all over the world.
How we now have rediscovered it and can witness Christianity so far back.
Behind each of these original artifacts lies a powerful story reaching across generations.
It's kind of crazy, and how they just finally discovered it, which is pretty significant, I think.
From teenagers to history teachers.
This exhibit, for sure, has been my favorite part.
We saw an eagerness to learn.
What we teach and something that is an artifact, something that is real, and something that most importantly is interesting, is really profound for students.
When I heard about this mosaic and read the story behind it, I got the same kind of chills and the same kind of goosebumps.
Historians like the Museum of the Bible Scholars Initiative director, Dr. Bobby Duke, described the Megiddo mosaic as the greatest discovery in Israel since the Dead Sea Scrolls.
What's something people don't know about this exhibit or may not know?
I would say the question we get asked the most often, is it real? It does date back to the 3rd century, AD 230.
A period before Christianity became an official religion of the Roman Empire. The Megiddo mosaic features a table used for communion and a design showing 2 fish, early symbols of Christianity, with handcrafted geometric patterns.
To make the designs that we see even around this flooring here, I mean, that takes hours and hours and hours.
The mosaic likely decorated one of the oldest Christian prayer halls in Megiddo, a city located in Canaan. In the 1940s, this site of ancient worship became buried under a newly maximum security prison, where it remained for 60 years. Then, in 2005, archaeologists accidentally rediscovered it.
They're wanting to do some construction, and whenever you do construction in Israel, you have to do a salvage archaeological dig to make sure that you're not constructing over something significant.
They carefully excavated the mosaic, hiding it securely in northern Israel, until flying it here for a first public appearance.
Show us some of the exciting features, the inscriptions.
So the first one right here is dedicated to a man named Gaianus.
Historians say he was a Roman centurion who helped fund the mosaic floor and table, a rare show of unity between Romans and Christians. The second inscription describes some key women in early Christianity, while the third marks history.
The table is dedicated to the God Jesus Christ. Now, this phrase, God, Jesus, Christ, is in the 5th line of the inscription, and it is actually in a shortened form, so the letters that have the lines over them, it is actually a respectful way to write those words.
Dr. Duke believes these early writings are some of the first to show belief in the deity of Jesus, with this inscription from a Christian woman identified as a Keptis that reads, God, Jesus, Christ. The Megiddo mosaic is one he hopes will open up a world of possibilities for future discoveries.
I think the thing that excites me the most is we never know what the next excavation is going to show and demonstrate. No one before 2005 would have ever dreamed we would have found something as beautiful and significant as this. So what's around the corner?
The Megiddo mosaic exhibit is on display here at the Museum of the Bible through July 2025. And after that, curators say it may visit some other U.S. museums before returning home to be memorialized close to its original site in northern Israel. Michelle London, CBN News, Washington.
Michelle, and up next, 3 different family members, all dead in a matter of months from hospital infections. And they're not alone. Faith Nation has the details when we come back. Well, you probably know going to the hospital can be a scary experience. Patients worry about the tests or the treatments they're facing. Plus, there's always the chance of getting an infection during their stay. Medical reporter Lori Johnson shows us the most common hospital infections and how to minimize the risk.
Armando Nahum knows what it's like for family members to become statistics after being infected in the hospital while being treated for a different reason. Sadly, he's probably seen it more than most.
3 members of my family were impacted with hospital-associated infections in 3 different hospitals, in 3 different states, in 10 months' time, culminating with the death of our son, Josh.
It began when Armando's father came down with pneumonia while being hospitalized for bypass surgery. Then, during a stay for a different surgery, his wife Victoria developed a staph infection. While they both survived, Armando says his 27-year-old son did not survive a sepsis infection contracted after being admitted and treated for skydiving injuries.
You always have a broken heart when you lose a child, but it doesn't matter how old the child is.
Armando's family isn't alone. On any given day, 1 out of every 31 patients has a healthcare-associated infection, leading to about 90,000 deaths per year. Bacterial infections make up the vast majority, which develop when bacteria enter the body through a surgical incision or due to a contaminated medical device like a catheter, central IV line, or ventilator. In addition to the damage to the patient, these illnesses cost the healthcare system billions.
If a patient acquires an infection while in the hospital, then it's the hospital that pays that. The insurance company and Medicare will not.
Hospitals like Virginia's Sentara Obici constantly look to reduce the risk. For example, after disinfecting rooms, advanced technology helps ensure they got rid of the bacteria by swabbing the area just cleaned, then inserting the swab into this reader that analyzes the surface.
Anything less than 250 is a pass. Anything over 250 is a fail. My team will come back and re-clean the surface if it failed.
Another disinfection practice involves bathing the room with ultraviolet C light, which studies show can reduce the transmission of 4 superbugs, MRSA, C. diff, Staph aureus, and Acinetobacter by 1/3.
Believe it or not, some hospitals now use copper to help fight infections on hard surfaces like this copper-infused overbed table, and even in linens like these bed sheets that have copper woven into them.
Copper just has natural antibacterial properties to it, so it helps kill any bacteria on site.
Opportunities to detect infections.
Healthcare workers understand the sooner a device is removed, the lower the risk of infection. So they evaluate each patient to determine whether that can be the day their device can be safely taken out. They also closely watch patients for symptoms of an infection, like fever or diarrhea, and whether they need testing.
While hospitals and other healthcare settings are taking steps to minimize the risk of infection, there's actually a lot patients and their families can do too, both ahead of time and during the stay.
The healthier a patient is before entering the hospital, the lower their risk. Experts say a big part of overall good health involves a robust gut microbiome. That means having good bacteria in the body, which can often fight off the bad bugs encountered at the hospital, especially those resistant to antibiotics like C. diff. Patients are advised to ask their doctor whether antibiotics are truly needed because these drugs tend to kill all bacteria, including the good.
C. diff is in all of us naturally, and if they're taking antibiotics that are not needed, it's going to kill the flora that's in your stomach that helps prevent C. diff from kind of going crazy.
Armando's experience with hospital infections motivates him to help others.
Ask a lot of questions. Don't be afraid to ask a question, and certainly don't be afraid to ask the healthcare workers to wash their hands. It is the most important single component in the delivery of care: hand hygiene, hand sanitizing.
Yes, clean hands. As simple as it sounds, it can also prevent visitors from spreading disease.
We touch our face so many times, we don't know what surfaces we've touched.
Some hospitals have lower infection rates than others, so do your research, and if you have a choice, talk to your doctor about which facility is best for you, or consult Hospital Compare on the Medicare website. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
Coming up, a piece of history sells for a pretty penny. Next on Faith Nation. Finally tonight, a piece of American history just sold at auction for a hefty price. A 237-year-old copy of the United States Constitution sold for $9 million at an auction in North Carolina. 2 years after it was found collecting dust in a filing cabinet on a plantation in the state, the rare document is one of about 100 copies printed by the Secretary of the Continental Congress in 1787, and the only copy to be privately owned. All right, we will leave it on that patriotic note this evening. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great Monday evening, and we'll see you back here tomorrow.